Steam coiled around Evelyn Grace Harper's boots, curling upward in ghostly ribbons before dissolving into the cold dawn air. The train's iron wheels groaned as it settled on the tracks, the hiss of pressure escaping into the silence of the platform. She stepped down with care, one gloved hand clutching the handle of her carpet bag, the other pressed lightly against her skirts to keep the wind from twisting them about her legs. The platform was almost empty, just two ranch hands unloading crates, the station master scribbling on a clipboard, and the sound of a horse stamping impatiently at the hitching post. She scanned the faces, her breath catching each time a man glanced her way. None matched the photograph she had memorized. The letters in her satchel had carried her across 1,000 miles, neat script on cream paper, full of steady words from a man named Thomas Avery, promising her a place, a life, a future. Each mile had been a step toward a door she believed would open. Now the space before her felt like a room she wasn't meant to enter. The station master cleared his throat when she approached, his eyes darting past her toward the tracks. If he was on his way, ma'am, he'd have been here when the train came in. She tried to smile, but it came out thin. Perhaps he's delayed. Hours passed. The train shrieked and shuddered before pulling away, leaving only the whistle's echo and the low sigh of wind. By noon, the sun had climbed high enough to throw long shadows across the dusty planks. Evelyn's feet ached, but she kept her back straight, watching the road for a rider, a wagon, anything. A tall woman in a dark wool dress approached, her stride brisk and sure. "You'll be Miss Harper, I presume?" Her voice had the clipped certainty of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Abigail Thornton, owner of the boarding house. Best we get you settled. Standing out here will do you no favors." Evelyn hesitated, her gaze sweeping the road once more. Abigail followed it, her mouth pressing into a line. "Sometimes men change their minds, dear. Best not to take it personal." The walk through town was a slow parade of glances and whispers. From shaded porches, shop windows, and behind wagons, eyes followed them. "That the bride?" Someone murmured. "Poor thing." Another voice, lower, chuckled. "At the boarding house." Abigail showed her to a small room at the end of the hall. The wallpaper peeled in curling strips, and the single window looked out onto the dusty main street. Evelyn placed her carpet bag on the bed and drew out her wedding dress, folding it over the quilt. The lace was a little yellowed from the journey, but she smoothed it with her hands as if the fabric could remember the dream that had carried it here. Evening settled over town, the air cooling into something almost tender. Evelyn sat on the porch to escape the scent of boiled cabbage from the kitchen. The horizon stretched wide, hills fading into the soft purple of dusk. A small figure appeared at the gate, a girl in scuffed boots, her auburn hair tangled with burrs. "You're the lady who came on the train," the child said, stopping a few feet away. Her voice was bright, but her eyes, green and clear, studied Evelyn with the seriousness of someone older. "My pa says you're staying here 'cause your man didn't show." The word struck with the same bluntness as a door slammed in the wind. Evelyn forced a smile, though her hands curled in her lap. "That's right." The girl tilted her head. "You need a home, and I need a mother." She said it like a simple truth, as if she were remarking on the weather. Before Evelyn could respond, footsteps crunched along the dirt road. A man emerged from the dusk, broad-shouldered, his shirt sleeves rolled, a battered hat shadowing his face. His gaze moved from the girl to Evelyn, pausing there with a quiet steadiness that was neither pity nor curiosity. "Rosie," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of use. "Time to come home." The girl, Rosie, skipped to his side, but not before glancing back over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. Evelyn watched him walk away. The man's stride measured, the girl's quick to match his. When they reached a bend in the road, Rosie turned once more, her eyes catching what little light remained, as if to make sure Evelyn was still there. Evelyn sat long after they had gone, the air cooling around her until the boards beneath her grew cold. The echo of the girl's words stayed lodged in her chest, heavier than her carpet bag, heavier than the dress waiting in the lamplight upstairs. Somewhere between the fading day and the coming dark, she realized that the man who had left her waiting might not be the only one capable of changing her life. Morning light spilled across the small room in pale ribbons, striping the quilt where Evelyn sat with her sewing. From her window, she could see the main street waking, wagons creaking past, shop doors opening, the faint clink of tack from the livery, and always, at the far edge of her view, the Carter Ranch fence line, where a small auburn-headed figure often played alone. She had begun to notice Rosie's patterns, the loop she traced in the dirt with a stick, the way she'd stop and stare toward town, as if waiting for something to appear. Evelyn's days had settled into a kind of narrow loop too, mending clothes for Abigail, walking to the mercantile, avoiding the sting of whispers that trailed her like burrs. She felt them even when she couldn't hear them. The wedding dress lay folded in the corner, its lace beginning to lose the faint scent of lavender it had carried from back east. She hadn't touched it in days. One afternoon, the sound of boots on the porch pulled her from her stitching. Rosie stood there, clutching a doll with a loose arm. Without preamble, she held it out. "Can you fix her?" Evelyn knelt, taking the doll gently. "What happened?" "Pa says she's just worn from too much lovin'." Rosie watched as Evelyn threaded a needle, her eyes following each stitch. When the work was done, Rosie grinned, a quick, bright thing, and asked, "You ever bake peach pie?" "Not in years." "Then you should come to our place. Pa's not much for pie, but I am." Before Evelyn could weigh the invitation, Rosie had taken her hand, tugging her toward the road. The Carter Ranch sat a mile out, the path lined with wind-bent fence posts and the soft sound of grass whispering against their skirts. In the kitchen, Rosie rummaged through a tin for sugar, while Evelyn peeled the last of the summer peaches. The air warmed with the scent of fruit and pastry, and her laughter rose, surprising her with its ease. Daniel appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, watching them as though uncertain whether to step in or leave the moment untouched. When he finally spoke, it was only to say the oven ran hot. Over the following weeks, Rosie found reasons to appear at the boarding house, returning a scarf Evelyn had left behind, delivering eggs from their hens, or slipping folded notes written in a child's careful, uneven script. "Come for supper. Pa says it's fine." Evelyn wasn't sure that last part was true, but she went anyway. The town noticed. At the mercantile, two women fell silent when she entered, their gazes shifting with a weight meant to be felt. Abigail's voice was gentle but edged when she said, "It's kind to befriend the girl, but folk will talk if you keep spending time at their place." Evelyn nodded, but the warmth in her chest when Rosie's small hand slipped into hers was not something she was willing to forfeit to rumor. Still, she found herself walking to the ranch less often, choosing instead to meet Rosie at the edge of town. One evening, Daniel insisted on walking her back. They moved in companionable quiet, the sky deepening to cobalt above them. Halfway to the boarding house, he said, "I'm grateful for what you've done for Rosie. She's brighter since you came." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Then why do I hear a but in your voice?" He hesitated. "This town, it doesn't forget quickly. I don't want you hurt by their talk." The words lodged somewhere deep, heavy with a caution that felt too close to dismissal. "I've survived worse than whispers, Mr. Carter." They reached the porch in silence. He tipped his hat and turned away, his shadow stretching long in the lamplight. Evelyn stood watching until he disappeared around a bend, the echo of his voice tangled with the memory of Rosie's earlier laughter. Upstairs, the wedding dress waited in the dim light, its folded shape a quiet reminder what she had come here for, and what she might want now. For the first time, she imagined it not for the man who had failed to arrive, but for someone who stood in her kitchen doorway, silent and steady, while she laughed with his daughter. She set her sewing aside and moved to the window, out past the glow of town lamps. The Carter Ranch was a faint silhouette against the darkening hills. She couldn't see Rosie from here, but she could almost hear her voice, plain and certain as the day they'd met. "You need a home, and I need a mother." Somewhere inside that simple truth lay the start of something she couldn't yet name, but she knew it would change everything. The wind rose without warning, a hard summer gust that rattled the boarding house shutters and sent grit skittering across the porch. By afternoon, the clouds had thickened into a bruised wall above the hills, and the air pressed heavy, smelling of rain. Evelyn was mending a tear in her skirt when the pounding came, small fists against the door, urgent and uneven. She opened it to find Rosie, soaked to the skin, hair plastered to her cheeks. "Pa's hurt," she gasped. "The barn beam fell, he can't get up." There was no hesitation. Evelyn grabbed her shawl and followed the girl into the downpour. The road blurred beneath the curtain of rain, their boots sinking into the softened earth. Rosie's small hand was a warm, desperate anchor in hers. The Carter ranch loomed through the storm, the barn doors swinging open and shut in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of wet hay and splintered wood. Daniel lay near the far wall, pinned beneath a heavy beam, his shirt darkened with sweat and rain. "Rosie, fetch that crate," Evelyn said, her voice calm despite the rush in her veins. Together they levered the beam just enough for Daniel to crawl free, his breath coming hard. She helped him to his feet, feeling the tremor in his frame, then guided him into the house. The storm clawed at the walls as she wrapped his ribs with clean cloth torn from a sheet. Her hands brushed the warmth of his skin, the rise and fall of each careful breath. He watched her with an intensity that made her aware of every movement, but he said nothing until she tied the last knot. "You didn't have to come in this weather," he murmured. She met his gaze. "Yes, I did." By the hearth, Rosie had curled into a blanket, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Evelyn settled beside her, the girl's head finding its place against her side. In the soft flicker of firelight, the sound of Daniel's breathing mingled with the steady rhythm of rain on the roof. Rosie stirred, her voice drowsy but certain. "Told you could be my mama." The words caught in Evelyn's throat. She smoothed the girl's damp hair, feeling something loosen inside her chest, a space that had been tight and empty for far too long. When morning came, the storm had washed the sky clean, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth. Daniel moved stiffly, but insisted on walking her back to town. The road was quiet, save for the dripping of trees along the fence line. At the edge of Main Street, heads turned, conversations paused as the three of them passed. The rancher with his daughter, and the woman they had once pitied as the abandoned bride. Daniel's stride was steady, his hat pushed back to meet the stairs. Rosie skipped between them, holding Evelyn's hand in plain view. Abigail watched from the boarding house porch, her expression unreadable. Evelyn felt the weight of eyes on her, but kept her chin lifted, each step a quiet refusal to shrink. Near the mercantile, Daniel slowed. "You don't have to," he began, but she cut him off with a small shake of her head. "I know." She glanced down at Rosie, whose grip tightened. "But I want to." They stopped outside the boarding house. Daniel tipped his hat, the faintest smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Supper's at 6. You'll come." It wasn't a question that needed answering, and she didn't try. Instead, she looked to Rosie, who beamed as if the matter had already been settled. As they turned to go, Evelyn lingered on the step, watching them walk away. The easy line of Daniel's shoulders, the way Rosie's small hand swung freely at his side. The street around her began to stir again, voices rising, boots striking the boards, but none of it touched her. For the first time since she stepped off that train, she didn't feel like a woman left behind. She felt like someone walking toward something. Upstairs, the folded wedding dress waited in the corner, still marked by the journey that had brought her here. She crossed the room, touched the fabric, and imagined it in a different light, not for the man who had never come, but for the life quietly forming around her, stitched from small acts, steady hands, and a little girl's unshakable certainty. Down the street, thunder rumbled again, low and distant, as if to remind her that storms could come without warning. But so could the things worth weathering.